Suppose we are writing a software for a bank, for a banking domain, and we have to map the functions to different classes. So we are writing our Java code to represent the bank functions. Now a bank has different functions, and one of them is to calculate the interest. Now the interest can be calculated in different ways, and we have just identified some of them. So for example, there is one way to calculate the interest for fixed deposit. Monthly, to calculate the interest monthly is a different thing, and it will have a bit different implementation. Similarly, if we are calculating the interest yearly, the yearly interest calculator would have a different implementation, slightly different implementation. And there could be some other ways, to calculate the interest, so they would have their own implementation in terms of Java code. So we said that okay, for each type of interest calculator we would have a different class. Now because there could be different interest calculators, there are different classes, so how do we keep things consistent and simple? So we already learned the concept of inheritance, and we thought why not create a parent class to keep things simple, and all the different types of interest calculator classes would inherit from that class. So we will have a clean inheritance hierarchy. And with this thought we created the parent class interest calculator, and we use the concept of inheritance. So all the interest calculator subclasses are now inheriting from the main class. Now that we have the class hierarchy, let's try to define the behavior of the types. So we know from the function mapping that interest calculator, the main function, the main behavior of the interest calculator is to calculate the interest. So we know there would be at least one method in the interest calculator, and the name of the method we can say is to calculate. So we know it must have one method calculate, and by the definition of inheritance all the subclasses would have the same method. Whether they override it or not, they will all have the calculate method uh, that they will inherit from the parent class. Till now we understand whatever is going on in this exercise. Now the problem is we don't really know how the calculate looks like for the parent interest calculator. We don't know how to calculate the interest, because when we talk about the fixed deposit implementation, the implementation knows how to calculate the interest for fixed deposits, and that kind of implementation we can write in the calculate method of fixed deposit when we are overriding the calculate method in the fixed deposit subclass. Similarly, when we are overriding the method in the monthly subclass, we know how to calculate the interest monthly. So that logic will go in the calculate method of monthly interest calculator class, and similarly for the yearly. But when we talk about the parent class, we don't know what kind of default implementation should we put in the calculate class, because this is the parent, it doesn't know what kind of interest it has to calculate. So we can't give a default implementation. All right. Now this is problem number one. The problem number one is that we can't give a default implementation. In this case, it's not always the case, but sometimes we don't have a default implementation. So how do we solve it? Because we know the methods in the class must have a body. So we decided to write something like this. For example, so we have the parent class interest calculator, and in the class we have the calculate method, and because the method must have a body but we don't know the default implementation, so we decided to keep it empty. Now any class that is inheriting from the interest calculator would inherit the calculate method with an empty body, so all the classes, all the subclasses would have to give their own implementation when they are overriding the calculate method. That is fine, but it is not clear from the code of interest calculator what this empty implementation is supposed to do. It's a workaround to do the same thing because we don't have the default implementation, but it's not clear because there must be something here that should tell us that okay, we don't know the default implementation, but we want to force the subclasses to have their own implementation. Alright, so there are two problem statements now, and we will be focusing on them now. So there are two things that we need in such cases. The first one is that all subclasses must have the calculate method or must have the same method. So we know that this can be solved by inheritance. If we define a method in the parent class, then all the subclasses would have the same method. So problem number one can be solved by the inheritance. The problem number two is that we don't know the default implementation. We can't give a default implementation. So we want to force the subclasses to give their own implementation. The important thing is here to force. And we don't know how to solve this problem. So there will be inheritance, but how do we force the subclasses to give their own implementation? Because if we define a method with empty body, then a child has a choice. So let's say if someone adds a new calculator here, let's say C, but he or she forgot to override the calculate method. In that case, that particular type of interest calculator does nothing because it is overriding the empty method from the parent. So we want to force the subclasses to have their own implementation. And this piece of problem is solved by abstract classes with abstract methods. So what are abstract methods and how can they solve this particular problem? So till now we have seen the methods with body. So if we define a method, let's say public void work, then we have seen methods like this. The methods have the curly braces, and these curly braces define the body of the method, and in the body we put our logic. Then there are parentheses to accept the arguments. So this is the method with body. Abstract methods are those methods that don't have any body. So if we have to convert the same method to an abstract method, we would write something like this: the access modifier, abstract keyword, return type, name of the method, parentheses, and then instead of curly braces we put semicolon, just like we declare a variable. So there are two things. One is the abstract keyword in the method definition, and second thing is we remove the curly braces because this method does not have any body, and we put the semicolon directly. Now if we have to define an abstract method that accepts some argument, some parameters, so it is simple. We do the same thing: public abstract, let's say this type, the return type is integer and method is sum. So we would say it would accept two parameters n1, int n2, and semicolon. So abstract keyword, and instead of curly braces we are putting the semicolon in the end. So abstract methods are those methods which don't have the body, they don't have the implementation, they just have the method declaration. So these are the abstract method. Now how are we going to use it? To use that we need abstract classes. Now what are the abstract classes? Abstract classes are those classes which have the abstract methods. Alright, this is very simple. How do we create abstract classes? So we follow the same pattern: access modifier, then abstract keyword in the class declaration, then class and the name of the class. Now this is an abstract class, and in the abstract class we can put the abstract methods: public abstract void calculate. Now this is a perfectly legal abstract class in Java. So we put the abstract keyword in the class declaration, then in that class we can declare abstract methods. Now this any abstract class can have, so any abstract class can have abstract methods and non-abstract methods. What does it mean? So when we are creating an abstract class, so in that abstract class we can put abstract methods as we did here. We can also put non-abstract methods, or the methods with body, methods with their implementations. So we can write a simple method here, let's say public void and work and some body sop, some print statement. So this is valid. An abstract class can have abstract methods and simple methods with implementations. But if any class has any abstract method, then the class must be abstract. So for example, we cannot say something like this. If we remove the abstract class and we say that we are creating a simple class, a non-abstract class, then this is not valid. Why? Because this class has abstract method. So a simple class cannot have abstract methods, but an abstract class can have both kind of methods. So if a class has a single abstract method, then also the class must have the abstract keyword. The class must be abstract. So we know that abstract methods don't have the body here, and we know that the abstract classes uh, are the classes that can have abstract methods. Now let's see how do we solve the problem using abstract classes. So here, if we come back to the problem statement, so there were two problems that we had to solve actually. The first one was that all classes must have the calculate method. We know that can be solved by inheritance. And the second problem was that because we don't have the default implementation, so we want to force the subclasses. Now this can be solved by abstract keyword, or the concept of abstract classes and methods in Java. So what we can do, instead of defining the interest calculator in this way, we can create an abstract parent class. So we say that public abstract class interest calculator, and in this class, instead of giving a method with default implementation, we would declare an abstract method because we don't know the default implementation. So we say that public abstract void, for example, calculate and semicolon, not the curly braces and semicolon. That's it. So instead of creating a plain parent class, we created an abstract class that has an abstract method. Now any class that extends the calculator class, interest calculator class. So let's say we have another class that is monthly calculator, which is extending the interest calculator. Now the thing is, we saw in the lectures of inheritance that a child always has a choice. When a class is inheriting from the parent class, it always has a choice to use the default implementation or to override the method. But in case of abstract classes, because there is no default implementation, an abstract class can have several abstract methods and they don't have any implementation. So whenever a class inherits from an abstract class, Java compiler forces the child class to give the implementation of all the abstract methods defined in the parent class. And that's how we force, if we come back to a problem statement, that's how we force the subclass to give the implementation of some methods. Now in this case, because the parent has a single abstract method and monthly calculator class is inheriting from the interest calculator, which is an abstract class, so monthly calculator class will have to provide the implementation of the calculate method. There is no other choice. This is a compile time restriction that now the class has to provide the implementation of the calculate method. When we are providing the implementation of an abstract method, in that case we don't write the abstract here, but we write the simple plain old method with the body, because we have to provide the implementation, so there is no point of writing abstract keyword here. So we don't do that when we are overriding the abstract method. Now I will be repeating the same thing again. Whenever a child class inherits from the abstract class, it must give the implementation of all the abstract methods defined in the parent class. So for example, if this class, if we change the parent class to have another abstract method, int sum, for example, in that case the child must give the implementation of sum as well. So this is no longer valid. If we write this class now, it is no longer valid. We will have to write the method implementation of sum. Now this is fine. So these are the rules with abstract classes. So just to recap, abstract methods don't have any implementation, so they don't have the curly braces. Abstract classes can have abstract and non-abstract methods, and they must have the abstract keyword in the class declaration. Similarly, whenever a child is extending an abstract class, then it must give the implementation of all the abstract methods. The only there is one rule though. If a class is inheriting from the from an abstract class and it doesn't want to give the implementation of some of the methods, so for example, if we remove the sum method from the child here, so if we remove the sum method from the child here, it won't compile, because the rule is that the child must give the implementation of all the abstract methods defined in the parent class, and uh, we only have the implementation of calculator, but we don't have the sum method in the monthly calculator class, so this will not compile. But if the child wants to have this flexibility, if it doesn't want to provide the implementation of all the abstract classes, only some of them, then there is one way, that the child class should be the abstract class. So in that case, what we can do, we can convert this class to an abstract class, which now solves the problem, because compiler knows that this child is an abstract class too, so it can have abstract methods. Alright, so in this case, the abstract child class is overriding the calculate method, but not the sum method, and sum remains an abstract method in interest calculator and in monthly calculator, and that's valid because monthly calculator class is also an abstract class. So these are the rules that we need to remember for abstract classes, and in the next lecture we will see some code examples. Thank you.